In 2041, the fate of Antarctica will be decided as the current treaty that protects the Earth's last great wilderness from exploitation comes to an end. Our guest on this show, Robert Swan, the polar environmentalist, talks to us about the remaining 20 years of a 50-year mission to preserve Antarctica as a natural reserve for science and peace. 10 years ago, I had the privilege of spending a month with him travelling to and learning about Antarctica on an expedition he's led each year to take climate scientists, business leaders and students to see firsthand the effects of climate change on this most remarkable of environments. He tells us about what he's learned about leadership and his mission to raise awareness and create a community of leaders willing to take action. I'm sure a lot of people will have a kind of palpable question in their mind about the perils of the journeys that you went on, those first journeys. You said a few years ago the draw was the place itself, the tragedy, the drama, the story, the diaries of Scott. There is no edge, there are no lies because it wants you dead. Very, very, very poetic. Where did you face, the peril, and what did you learn about yourself in the process?
Well, I never did this on my own. I would still be in a warehouse in the East End of London on the River Thames talking about doing this. So it really was an extraordinary group of people that came together. And one looks back and it's hard to imagine that to get to Antarctica 30 years ago, you couldn't fly there as a private citizen. You had to take a ship. You had to go and live in Antarctica in a box with, 4 people that you didn't get on well with for 9 months, 4 months of darkness, huge test of isolation. We've been going through a lot of isolation, all of us recently, and I learned a lot about isolation inside that hut. And then 3 of us walked to the pole. But in those days, no fancy GPS, no radio communications. You're heading off 900 miles into the middle of Antarctica and there's nothing there. So no backup, no can't ring up mummy on the iPhone 12. This was hard to imagine today. No satellite phones, nothing. So the danger was ever present, that if you made mistakes, you weren't going to come home. And I think that in today's society, it's hard to imagine that, even I find it hard to imagine that we did that, but that was the way it was to both poles in those days. And now on our journeys, because we haven't finished yet, we're in the middle of a huge campaign and mission to finish our journey of crossing Antarctica. And now I've got a satellite phone. It's fantastic. But the big danger was no communications, no backup. And if you fell down a crevasse or injured yourself, you'd be left to die. Simple as that. So it was ever present. But I think the biggest dangers that hit us came from something that no one had ever talked about. That when we walked to the South Pole, after about a month out of 70 days, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, our eyes began to burn. And then our faces, literally, it felt like the whole skin had erupted out, and then huge layers of skin just ripped off our faces. And we didn't know why. And we hadn't read about this in Scott's diaries and Shackleton's diaries and Amundsen's diaries of 100 years before. And we didn't know what was going on, but we forged on, got to the South Pole, came back, and we were told by NASA that we'd walked under the hole in the ozone layer the month it was discovered. And in those days, you didn't have sort of fancy Oakley goggles. You just had a sort of pair of really quite grim dark glasses, and the ultraviolet rays had ripped us to pieces. And that was something that changed my life. And then we went to the North Pole, and it's enough danger walking across a frozen ocean with polar bears and minus 60 degrees Celsius. It's pretty hard anyhow. And then we got 100 miles from the North Pole, and the entire ocean melted beneath our feet. Now, this is way before climate change, sustainability, global warming. No one had mentioned it. but the ice caps melted. We were 642 miles from land, no rescue, no one could get to us, and we had to fight through, an ocean that was melting beneath our feet. Now, you can't walk to the North Pole. There's no ice. So those moments of danger, not present to ourselves walking, that's in answer to your question, why did I come out of all of that determined to do my best? Well, if you've touched it, seen it, witnessed it that close, and it damn near fried your face off, burnt out your eyes, and nearly drowned the team, I think you kind of take it a bit more seriously.
We hope you're enjoying the Evolving Leader shorts that we're releasing before we start Season 7 in September. You can find the rest of this conversation and all of the Evolving Leader episodes on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and your favourite podcast outlet. I'll also put a link in the show notes.